My name is George Capaccio, and I have a story about something that could never actually happen. But I did read in the newspaper about a fellow who had a pine tree growing out of him. And apparently that's true. I don't know how it happened. And so the story I'm going to tell you is about something that really probably would never, ever happen in the real world. It's from Japan, and it's called Once Under the Cherry Blossom Tree. In a small town in Japan, there lived a man, a wealthy man. He had a lot of money and a lot of property. He was a landlord. And his two favorite things to do in life were taking naps every afternoon and collecting rents from the people who rented his houses and apartments. But this fellow, whose name was Yakamoto, he was miserly, which means he didn't like to spend his money on anything. And he was quite mean. If he passed a little child in the street, that child would cry its eyes out. If he passed a dog in the street, the dog would turn its tail under its legs and run away. One day in the spring, it was time for the annual Cherry Blossom Festival, and everybody came into the town green to celebrate the birth of the spring and the beauty of the cherry blossoms. Yakamoto got dressed to see what all the commotion was about. He bought a little bowl of cherries and he started eating them. Look at all those people out there, eating and dancing and wasting their time. They should be working, making money, doing something useful. When Yakamoto swallowed a cherry pit. His face turned every color of the rainbow, and still he didn't get that pit out of his stomach. He went home, went to bed. Next morning he woke up and he yawned, and if you like, you can yawn with me. He scratched his head. What's this? He felt something, and he picked up a mirror and looked. There's a cherry tree growing out of my head. Must have come from that cherry pit. Now you'd think a reasonable person would go to the barber and have the barber snip it off. But not Yakamoto. Save a little money never hurts. So he let that cherry tree grow. 1 year later, in the spring, it blossomed. Beautiful blossoms all over the branches of the tree. Well, Yakamoto didn't care. All he cared about were two things: money and naps. Went to the Cherry Blossom Festival, forgetting about this beautiful tree. People saw it. They gathered around in amazement. And one boy said to his friend, "Look at that. How could something so beautiful come out of the head of someone as mean and ugly as our landlord?" Yakamoto heard that. Who said that? Which one of you said that? No one said a word. But he saw some boys, and they looked like they were guilty, and he began chasing those kids round and around the green. And by the time he had stopped, the blossoms had all blown away. All he had left were bare branches. Now, you'd think by now he would have learned a little something, but he didn't. He thought to himself he was so mad at what those children had said that he gripped a hold, and you can do this too, and pulled that cherry tree right out of his head. Now I've got firewood for tonight. Save a little money never hurts. Brought that tree home, chopped it up, and used it to make a fire in his house. Next morning he woke up, and if you like, you can yawn too. Scratched his head. Well, there's a hole in my head. Now, you'd think you'd go to the dentist and have that cavity filled, but save a little money never hurts. Went around collecting his rent, same as usual. One afternoon, he sat in his backyard and took a nap. Began to rain. The rain filled that hole in his head. The water overflowed the hole and trickled down his face. drowning! I'm drowned! No, I'm not. There's a puddle in the top of my head. He picked up his tea glass and tipped a little of that water in the glass. Clean. Clear. Tastes pretty good. Now I won't have to buy my water at the well anymore. Got all the water I need right here on top of my head. Went around collecting his rent, same as usual. Being very careful, though, kind of like a runway model. Didn't want to spill a drop. Well, one afternoon, he was sitting in his backyard, taking a nap. The wind blew his hat off, and a bird was flying overhead, bringing back some fish eggs to its children. Saw something glittering below and perched right on the brow of Yakamoto's head and bent over to take a drink. Well, those fish eggs fell out of the bird's beak. The fish flew off. A few days later, while Yakamoto was out and about collecting money, his rents, he felt something moving. I feel like I'm losing my mind. He reached up. A fish! I got all the food I want right here in the top of my head. Won't have to go to the fish market anymore. Put that fish back in the hole in his head, put his hat on, and went around collecting his rent, same as usual. One day later, taking a nap in his backyard, some children opened the gate and came into the garden. They had long bamboo poles and strings with little hooks on the end and worms. They carefully removed Yakamoto's hat and dipped their fishing poles. And they waited and waited until one of them felt a little nibble. And they yanked up a big, fat, red golden carp and ran out of the yard. Woke up Yakamoto. Hey, that's my fish you've got there, and I know who your parents are. Began running after those children. He ran so fast he didn't see the log in his way, tripped over that log. His feet went head over heels, until his feet disappeared in the hole in his head. All that came down was the puddle. Spread out became a pond. That pond is still there. And even to this day, people love to gather around the pond. And now there are many cherry trees that blossom every spring around the pond. And there are beautiful golden carp swimming in the pond. And people ask themselves, as they've done for generations, how something so beautiful could have come from someone so mean and ugly once under the cherry blossom tree. Thank you.
Thank you, George.